by you introducing yourself, what you do, and how you come to be. Let's start with the introduction first before we go into how you start working around TPA issues.
Okay. So my name is Amina Salihu. I live and work in Nigeria. I'm a feminist, a farmer, and a philanthropist. I have always lived in Nigeria, though, I have friends all over the world, and I have, networks also spread through my work and my interests as a feminist. I was a senior special assistant to the Minister of the FCT between 2004 and 2007, Malan Nasir Ahmed El-Rufai. And after that, I took off. So at the end of the administration, I went off to the University of Sussex to reflect on what I had learned during my work there. And one of my work, which was around the Abuja Town Hall meeting and creating participation and accountability through the use of technology. I mean, as early as 2004, was nominated and shortlisted for the Reinhard Mohn Prize in 2011, years after, like 3-4 years after we had left the FCT. I worked with the DFID program, Coalitions for Change. I was the team lead for about 4 years, after which I left to make out time for myself to do 3 things: to pay attention to my children who were going into late teenagehood then, and because while I was in government, their father held forth, so it was my turn now to stand back and let him do his own thing. And second, to finish my PhD. And third, to focus on the family farm, which we had started in 2005. And after that, I re-emerged and began to work with the MacArthur Foundation as senior program officer.
Yeah, okay. So I can see the transition from you and then from the work you do. So what actually motivated you to actually say, yes, this TPA issue is like my bread and butter. I'm interested in doing this for the long haul. What motivated you to start to work? I know what make you start working, but to actually be there for a while now.
Some of us are just blessed to be able to earn, bread, butter, jam from the things that we love to do and need to do. And I think if I were to reflect back to the kind of person that I am, I think issues of transparency or participation, accountability have probably always been with me. If you're a feminist, you know that any form of oppression, at least that's how I define being a feminist. I do not tolerate any kind of oppression. And I believe that women and men are created equal and each has equal rights. And I think for me, right from my secondary school days, beside me, because reflecting on the question, I was like, when did this all start? Even before I knew what being a feminist meant, because I met my first person who defined themselves as a feminist in my university days, in my undergraduate days at Ahmadu Bello University. But in secondary school, I was always fighting for the younger ones. And my colleagues remind me later that I was like a crusader. So at a point in time, I was and you remember this, when you're a prefect, responsibilities are, like you're more responsible, you are a role model. I was the assistant food prefect, which meant that the kitchen and ensuring that everybody got their share of the food was like in my hands. I had a senior, but she just left it to me because I think she felt, I can handle it. And this big, we're all kids, but to me, who was a third former, these were big seniors who would come in and after getting their share, and at the table, they would get a very robust share and get the best piece of meat. And then the little that is left, they still want to have a share in it. And you have young girls, because it was a girls' school, Federal Government Girls College Bida, who some of them were leaving home for the first time and they were not used to this hard life. And these seniors still want to share this little leftover that this little girl should actually have more of. And I was swapping. With the benefit of hindsight, I think I was swapping in, because I was saying, no, senior, so, and so, you had your share. These girls also need to grow. They will eat this. or I would ask everyone to just return what was left at their table back to the collective, like pot, and then I'll ask Form 1, Form 2, line up and collect extra. So, and I don't think the seniors liked me, but I really didn't care. I just felt you had already gotten more than your fair share, and you still want this. Where is the justice? So being in university and being part of the student movement was another natural for me, therefore, trajectory. And I remember that in 89, my friend and I, she's passed now, Hassan Agarba, organized, a protest against sexual violence and harassment on campus. And we had to run away after that because the authorities were coming after us. So we had mentors, we had cells, we had leaders who looked out for us, who supported us to think outside the textbooks and the classrooms and to show leadership. And after we had to run away, they came after me, and someone came to look for me, and that person they sent to look out for me became the man that I married after that. So some of us are just lucky, Busayo, to earn bread and butter from the things that, that's just who we are. That's what we need to do.
So working in this field now with that is more of like how you've come to be, but now that you are working around this issue as an adult, what are the challenges you face as a woman?
So, there are always challenges, but side by side with challenges are also opportunities. So one key challenge that I face every day as a human being, really, in doing the work, is asking myself whether I'm accountable enough to myself and to others, and to the values that I expect other people to hold up. Because it's very easy, as a MacArthur Foundation grant maker officer, to just put your head down on the paper and do the writing and expect others to answer questions, who is benefiting, why isn't that benefiting, why aren't you doing this? But to also ask yourself as a human being, whether you deserve to be in that position to be able to ask those questions. I mean, I've never said this to anyone before because no one has ever asked me this question but you, Busayo. But that for me is my greatest challenge. In my personal life, in my dealings with others, in my relationship. And every year the foundation demands that we do a full disclosure, to avoid conflict of interest, and not really but to state it up front, so that once it is known, you're protected and you're advised how to stay off it. And I'm always asking myself, have I declared adequately? What are those other relationships I might not remember that I need to remember? How am I being mindful of those? And so for me, that's really the hardest part of doing this work. The second, of course, is to ensure that you are giving the right kind of advice, to ensure that foundation resources are used in the most effective value for money way. And it is not easy because you have to balance a lot of diversities. You need to be sure that you have the right kind of organization getting the resource. You need to be sure that the kinds of results that are being declared are results that are impactful, that can sustain the work, that can touch life, that are really looking at, shifting the needle towards accountability. You also want to be sure that you're fair enough so that you lend support to those organizations to be more than just, grant recipients, but to be, bigger leaders in the scope, and to be able to take the opportunity of having intersected with your work to really catalyze, transformative change beyond just one grant. So always not being complacent, but asking oneself, what more can you do? How else can you work? Who else is in the space that you're not mindful of? These are fundamental things that continue to shape the way I see myself and I see the space of accountability, transparency and all.
Okay. Moving on, what are the changes you have seen? You've been working like professionally in this field for how long now?
So I've been working professionally in this field for like 30 years.
Oh, wow.
So when I say professional, when I say professionally, I'm 50 this year. And right from my university days, I've been part of movements. I've had, I told you about meeting my first feminist as an undergrad. I was part of the Ahmadu Bello Gender and Women's Studies group. And that was like, 92? Right after my youth service, I was asked to return to work in the Department of Political Science, where I graduated. And that was 93. So so I guess and I began to work with so I left to work with CDD in 99. So 93 to date, that's certainly over 20 years, almost 30 years.
Yeah. So what changes have you seen so far? You've been working in Nigeria for a while. You said you've always been working in Nigeria, right?
Always been working in Nigeria.
So what changes have you seen so far?
And so let me classify the changes in terms of some of the intersections that I have seen, as well as some of the sectoral changes that I have seen. So one of the intersects is the fact that in the last 30 or so years, in terms of my observation of what has changed, I've realized that there's an increasing understanding of the need to bring gender equity and social inclusion to analysis. That understanding of the way in which power needs to be reconceptualized and reapplied, and the understanding of who has power and who is powerless, and to be able to factor that into development work, into government planning, into civil society agitation. So I'm very happy to see that increase and shift. I mean, before Beijing 95, for example, we didn't even understand what it meant to understand that women had rights, or that every sector mattered to women. And it wasn't just about providing home economics in school. That's reinforcing the stereotype in girls' schools. Put the home economics in the boys' school as well, and put a computer lab in the girls' school. So we didn't understand all of these intersections of education and health and well-being and all of that. But now that is shifting. Right now, I'm part of a process where we're asking the question of the next development plan for Nigeria. Where is the gender equity and social inclusion analysis? I don't think that could have happened when we were doing the PRSP papers in 1990s, for example. Second intersection is also the recognition that for transformative and sustainable change to happen, civil society cannot stand apart and government stand apart. We need collaboration. In the sense that civil society has ideas, has knowledge, but civil society does not have the authority to drive change, if you get what I mean. Government has the authority to drive change, and the capacity sometimes to do so is not always given. But when you bring the strengths of each together, you can get a whole lot more going. And the MacArthur Foundation has used this effectively well in terms of our program called the On Nigeria program, which I'm sure TPA you'll be familiar with. And that is the fact that we need the teeth and voice actors to work together to enhance each other's strength, to collaborate, to share ideas and resources, to maximize opportunity for growth. So those two intersections are important changes that I have seen going forward in this country. Third is the role of technology, and the fact that technology is actually being used in incredible ways to shift the outcome, of things that can have far-reaching import for the lives of citizens. Take the Nigerian election in 2015, for example, and the role of the social media, being a civic tech platform, and how citizens were able to organize to, for the first time in the history of Nigeria, unseat a sitting, president. And even with COVID-19 and the fact that there's been some human rights violations that are understandable and some that are absolutely unacceptable. I'll give you an example of what I mean by each. Understandable in the sense that the Nigerian Constitution guarantees freedom of movement, but at a point in time, in order to safeguard all of our lives, government locked down the country. We can understand that. But the kind of violation that is unacceptable is the fact that just because we're all locked in, then our basic needs are not met, or that violence is escalated, or that organizations that should protect the rights of citizens like the police are now violating the rights of citizens. Those are absolutely unacceptable. Sexual and gender-based violence escalated. the police reported that between January and May 2020, about 717 cases were reported and more arrests were made. But we also know that there is complacency of the institution in terms of even responding to sexual violence, even before the pandemic. And how did we know this? It was through civic media. So you can't hide things anymore. As they're happening, it's all there in the public space. Information has been democratized. And so for me, that change is a very fundamental one. The fourth change I'd like to talk about, therefore, which is actually something to be mindful of, is therefore linked to the civic technology opportunity, the way in which the civic space itself is evolving. So it's a whole lot easier to reach many more people because you don't have to worry about the budget, to call a big meeting or fix a date. Everybody is their own news maker. They can make news and they can process news. But in doing that, there's also the fact that there isn't a very close attention to digital justice. And what do I mean? The more civil society uses, social media to expand the civic space, we're also marginalizing those who do not have access to the technology infrastructure to be able to participate and to have voice. And there's a danger that, people in riverine areas, the nomadic people who are displaced by conflict, women who are poor, people who always have a very short time use, if you will, situation will be excluded. And we're not asking those core questions about how we ensure that as we transit into this better, quote and unquote, world of technology, we're also thinking about who is left behind. After all, the entire SDGs is about leaving no one behind. Mm-hmm. So something good can also, of course, come with its challenges, and we need to be more analytical. We need to be more clear about where the opportunities lie and where the challenges lie. And I think the fifth for me is how we're able to hold government more accountable. It's not yet perfect, but because of this combination of the power of possibility of civic tech, of a civil society that's getting stronger and more able to resist, of the fact that on the African continent now, I'm sure you have followed the story of Mali and the fact that ECOWAS got together and said, you cannot have a military coup in 21st century, it's not possible. So that strengthens the civic voice. And so with all of these opportunities, therefore, there's so many more things that can happen. And there's more we can do, but we need to pay attention to the rights of the individuals, because there's still individuals who are kind of oppressed by the system, who are less understood, and we're still not able to shift that mindset to be open to difference and to be more accommodating of each other. We tend to take the tools and opportunities and to use them for the benefit of our own small space, not thinking about how our own opportunities might become a disadvantage to other people. So humanizing, to go back to where we started this conversation, humanizing our work and our thoughts and asking ourselves those hard questions about, we have made so much progress. It's important to protect those gains, but how do we not leave others behind? How do we be true catalyst and conscience, of everyone, to be sure that everyone has not equal, but equitable opportunity, as it were. So for me, these are the changes I'm most respectful of.
Okay, which brings me, you seem to have answered some of my next question, but I will say,
sorry.
Which is, these are the changes, you've mentioned the changes you have seen so far, but looking forward, what changes will you still like to see? What are those areas we still need to work on?
Yeah, so first, I would like us to recognize that the theory of change in a part of the world, on the African continent, is that even when you get all the variables right, you bring demand and supply together, you build capacity, you enable collaboration, you pay attention to the needs of the society and community generally, change will only happen in incremental steps. We need to recognize that. So what that means is that we must be mindful of those small changes and guard them. In other words, my key question to civil society is, even as we are trying to do more, how do we protect the gains we have achieved? For me, that's what I like us to see doing more going forward. Second is in terms of bringing a kind of a Johari's window to the work that we do. Where are other opportunities that we have not explored? what other voices have we not brought to the table? You know, what other innovative ways have we not thought about? So for example, I was in a webinar a few months ago, you know, during COVID, a lot of webinars have been happening, as you know, and I think that had to do with recovery and transformation and, you know, a post-COVID kind of civil society space. And I think I remember saying to colleagues on that call that, you see, now COVID-19 is showing us how to prioritize the use of our resources. It's showing us that we can do a whole lot more with little. And so as civil society, we need to reclaim our responsibility, not our rights, but our responsibility to be catalysts for change. It is not about us. Because COVID has been so close to the community and personal, people have made ways for themselves and they have survived. I mean, universal face mask for me is always my measure of the fact that people didn't think they needed money to go and buy or masks. Some people made masks. Some people, you know, like my kind of scarf, Busayo, I could just take my scarf, you know, and I'm done. So human creativity came to the fore. So you're not indispensable, civil society. Hello, your role should be about expanding the space and bringing more voices to the table so that they can bring that creativity more and you can create that connect between them and duty bearers. So how do we do more of that as civil society? Therefore, the second thing that I said to colleagues on that call is all of our big structures, big offices, do we really need them? You should have big offices in communities so that communities can actually use your space for their community town hall and have their meetings and have their trainings and have their, you know, like a political gathering space where you do your work as well. Because that is part of your work. Even if we need to have physical distancing, some of us have such huge office structures that you wonder, what is this investment about? Co-location might just help to keep the overhead down so we can pay our staff better, so we can look out for our staff more. Third is the condition of service under which our own colleagues work. We can't be telling government, do better, pay people better, and we ourselves are not looking out for our staff. Do we have sexual harassment policies at our workplace? Do people understand the process for making complaints or seeking redress? Because for me, sexual harassment is corruption. There can be no sexual harassment until there's already sexual corruption. Because we need to center the rights of the victim and to point the accusing finger at the perpetrator. The fact that somebody wears a certain dress or walks past you does not give you the right to take what does not belong to you. My bodily right is my bodily right. It doesn't belong to you. So it is corruption. Now, how are we creating safe spaces in our places of work? Some of us have not had this conversation, and I'd like to see us doing this as a way to go forward. And of course, final is the fact that we need to know that when you fight corruption, corruption fights back. Everybody says this, but we need to understand how corruption fights back. Sometimes we understand it, other times we do not understand it. And as we're guarding the gains, is to also look for ways by which we can fight back when corruption fights. To do an audit of the resource in our environment, which states are doing better so that they become our entry point, because it's so easy to burn out. And when you burn out, what else is there? Who will do this work of catalyzing change and supporting those who should lead the change? So identifying those spots where you have positive outliers and you can support them to do more, I think is what I would like to see. And finally, never to be complacent, even when things are working well, to ask ourselves, how else can we do better? I was just reading this morning about an old new tool that some colleagues are now using to force accountability, you know, and it's called cancellation culture. So this cancellation culture, you know, is to say, for example, we have heard the story about Sheyi and the bank in our social media, where Sheyi had accused the band, who is a Nigerian musician, of raping her, and we learned later that the police coerced Sheyi and arrested her briefly and handed her over to the person she's accusing. I was shocked to hear that. And a lot of agitation on social media led to the IG of police now saying, okay, we're going to investigate the matter, which should have been the case in the first instance. And in addition to that, even while the case is being investigated, because you know you're innocent until proven guilty, right? But why would the law take someone, you know, it's like you accusing me of wrongdoing, and then the law takes you and hands you over to me. Why? You have to investigate me, right? And so based on that, there was a huge outcry, because I think is one of the UN agencies ambassador, and there's a huge outcry to that UN agency to say cancel the endorsement. You know, because endorsement is two ways. If I make you ambassadors because I believe in your work and you also believe in my work, so so there's a call to actually cancel, you know, that endorsement, because that person's, if you get what I mean. So the respect that they had has been called to question, in other words. So that kind of way is the kind of thing I want us to continue to think about in civil society. It's so simple, my sister Busayo, but so fundamental, if you get what I mean. So what are simple and fundamental other things that we can begin to think of to continue not to be complacent, but to just continue to shift the space and to expand the civic space as much as possible?
Grace, thank you. So we're rounding off. So as a program officer, what advice will you give to your younger self? Think of someone who is taking on a role as a program officer. What do you wish you know in the beginning?
$1 billion question. So what do I wish to know now that I wish I had known at the beginning? Well, I wish I had known then what I know now in terms of knowing where to find support. You know, because this thing can burn you out. You can be all alone. Sometimes you can question your own sanity. So why am I doing this? I mean, imagine organizing a protest against sexual harassment in university, and then the authorities come after you. Everything was on the line, if you get what I mean. You know, if you're finishing school, which is what your parents sent you to school to go and do.
Not to be an activist.
Not being an activist, you know, and having to run away and not knowing where to run to. And then, you know, but the fact that they sent someone to come looking for me told me that networks matter. And if I'd known about building that strong network even before we went into this, you know, that no, it's not about you alone. Even in school, while I was being a crusader, if I'd had a few more of my friends, you know, standing with me and pushing back those bullying seniors, I probably would have done better. But of course, people were probably noticing because I had no idea. So after being a food prefect in my final year, I became, you know, like the senior prefect or the head girl, as it were, which put more responsibility on me. So it told you that people were listening. But I think a network is something that I would have probably put first. Second is also documenting all of those amazing things. You know, I didn't quite write in those days. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just being Amina, simple. But I look back now at my years in the last 20 years and all of the writing I have done, you know, contributing a column to Tell magazine, or just writing for Feminist Journal, or writing for anyone who says, Amina, tell us something about. So the last thing that my last work was to write something about Nigeria being 60. We're going to be 60 1st October. And so after Mail had asked me to write something, and I wrote, you know, Nigeria one day go better, which is pidgin for you know, someday things will be all right with us as a country. You know, that was the title of my essay. And so now I'm writing and I'm reflecting on those moments. And you remember some things you don't remember. So I wish I had done more documenting then. And I will say to colleagues now who are starting out young, do document. And so for my mentees, because I have like 5-10 mentees every year that are assigned to me from some organizations that I work with. And the first thing that I do at our first meeting is to take them out to lunch and to get them a journal. I do those two things because I want them to see me as a friend, because you do need support. And getting the right advice at the right moment can make the difference between you getting ahead and you breaking apart.
Mm.
So it's important that you're able to find those friendships when you need them, or to make those friends before you need them, therefore. And the journal, of course, because of that lesson I've learned about, you need to write to yourself. And there's certain things that might get you sometime 3 a.m. when something just, prods you awake, or you're in the shower or something, those kind of aha moments. You need to be able to write them down, because you don't know when you're going to need them later. You're going to need to bring them to the fore. So those two things, are crucial for me. They're the things that I would have told my younger self. Otherwise, every other thing that I know then, I know now. I know. The third thing I would have told my younger self, the third thing, which this is very funny, Busayo, is really not to make a promise you're not sure you can keep. And I think now that I'm older, I don't make promises. Everyone knows that. I would say inshallah, which, as a Muslim means, Allah permitting, or everything being equal. The economists will tell you ceteris paribus hardly ever happens anyway. And if it doesn't happen, it's not your fault, which is everything being equal in Latin. Or I would say I will try my best. And I learned this in a very funny way. Again, back to my secondary school days, Busayo. We write WAEC. Then you were Form 5. So in Form 5, I went to the mosque one day and sat and I prayed to the Almighty and I said, oh Lord, please help me pass WAEC. Please, as senior prefect and all of that, the pressure, how can you flunk? You're a role model and all of that. My father was an interesting person. He gives you one chance and that is it. So I didn't even he wasn't going to pay for GCE. No, it was just WAEC. You have to pass it and pass JAMB and be done with it. So I said to the Almighty, please God, help me pass WAEC. Please, Allah, just to pass this WAEC. If I pass WAEC, I would never ask you for anything again. Just help me pass. So, Messiah, the rest is history, because I'm sure you can tell what happened.
Oh, yeah.
I did pass WAEC, and then I realized that WAEC was only the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
I needed to ask God of more things, which of course the Almighty in the Almighty's wisdom knew that, fine, pass WAEC. That's easy. You need to learn a lesson. So I learned that lesson a long time ago in a very funny but fundamental way. To never make a promise you're not sure you can keep, because you don't know what tomorrow brings. And I did ask forgiveness of the Almighty, because I kept going back for more and more. And every day I still give thanks for the blessings of yesterday, the blessings of today, and the blessings of tomorrow. That's always my wake-up prayer every morning now. So that's something I learned being a 15, 16-year-old.
Great. Wow. Of course, it happens to the best of us. We ask every time. I'll be like,
imagine that, the age of innocence.
Yeah. Finally, if you have a superpower, this is supposed to be a fun question, really. So if you will have a superpower, what will you have?
If, I wish you had said when. So
Okay,
like
when?
I said, all right,
If and when. So you have to tell me which one and then why. Why do you decide?
Yeah. Interestingly, if I had superpowers, if I had powers to grant other people, because that is what superpower is, you use it in the public good for other people. Really, if I had superpowers, I'll give myself, I'll give people, I'll give government, I'll give everyone I come in touch with a second chance to right the wrongs and mistakes they have made. All I'd really ask for is a second chance. And of course, my superpower would mean that the second chance means you also have to do things right. You get what I mean?
Yes.
Because if you look at the mistakes that we have made, and with the benefit of hindsight, knowing what we know now and things that we could have done differently, but we cannot go back. I really wish I could turn the hand of the clock. I wish I could get a second chance. And look at it, I got a second chance, because at the age of 15 saying, I just need to pass my work. I don't want any other thing from you, Almighty God. I got a second chance because I got many more other things, and I got those things. And the things that I didn't get, I could understand that maybe they were not right for me, or it wasn't time. So learning that lesson, and if I had my own superpower, it would be to say, okay, I take that back. Can we start all over again and get it right this time? And imagine where Nigeria would be. Trillions of dollars would not have been stolen from this country. Our rail system would work. Our children would be hale and healthy. We would not have malnutrition. We would not have Boko Haram and conflict. You know, because if the sect leader of Boko Haram had not been killed extrajudicially, we probably wouldn't have been where we are today, for example. So you can see why I need the power of a second chance.
Yeah.
Is it in your power to grant me, Busayo? I'm
No,
very happy.
in the hands of God, Almighty. That's great. Thank you very much, Amina.
Thank you so much. Thank you
For
so
our
much.
invitation.